The competitive 40K network presents Art of War. Art of War. Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Do you spend tons of hours hunched over a table building and painting models? Maybe you're up late at night reading about all the Warhammer 40K lore. Whatever your optical needs, Serious Readers has got you covered. They produce amazing, high-quality HD lighting which simulates daylight indoors. It's amazing for painting or reading, and it's recommended by over 500 opticians. You can use discount code AOW to save £100 on any HD light. That's over $100. Visiting landing page seriousreaders.com/AOW. That's seriousreaders.com/AOW. With the discount code AOW, there's a link below in the description of the podcast episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Art of War podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nanavati, and I am especially honored today for our guest all the way from France, Yohann Teston. Johan, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. Johan has been on the forefront of the French WTC team for a while now, and now he is crushing it with Grey Knights, an army we have not had on the show for quite some time. And I'll have you know, he's doing it with not even playing 6 Dreadknights. You know, it's a brand new army over here, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to get to know Johan. We're going to get to know his playstyle, his approach to the game, and this Grey Knight list, how it works, the ins, the outs, the tricks, the whole kit and caboodle. And then in part 2, for our subscribers, which you can subscribe on AOW40K.com. That is our Patreon. $5 a month gets you access to part 2 of the episode, along with 239 other episodes and our amazing Discord server. In part 2 of this episode, you're going to access all the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about the games Johan played at a tournament, which he just won, a major event, largest tournament that happened this past weekend. And he did it with his Grey Knight army in a field of all kinds of good stuff. Some very sharp players in France. So we're going to learn how it works. We're going to learn about the French meta, and we're going to learn all that nitty-good stuff in part 2. Johan, are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
Awesome. I'm excited. So tell me a bit about yourself. How did you get into Warhammer?
Okay, so it started quite a while ago, like when I was 14 in high school, and just met a friend, was playing 40K, and I was like interested in the game. But at the time, we wanted to play fantasy, so actually I started with Fantasy Battle, because it was around that time that Tom King's got released. So I started with an army of Tom King's, and I played actually quite a lot of fantasy up until 2017, actually, where I made Team France for 9th Age. It was like the next game after Fantasy Battle died.
Right.
Never played Age of Sigmar. So yeah, I went to Salamanca, the ETC. And then after that, I grew kind of bored of Fantasy Battle because, you know, it's just like all that geometry, always units
it's a
looking
very
at each other.
game, for sure.
Yeah, and I always liked the lore of 40K, and then I just kind of started to play with a group of friends, and being the competitive guy that I am, I just moved right away to tournaments because I've been playing so many of them with fantasy. So I just booked an army of sisters at the time. It was early 8th in 2018. Actually, it was not early 8th, but it was Index Sisters still. So, I got an army together and went to play some tournaments with like an Imperial soup, like Blood Angel Sisters and Custodies. It was really weird at the time. And I got really into the game and never stopped playing the 40K since. And now I'm playing with a group of guys, mostly from the south of France. Because if you don't know the French scene, we do have this league system where it's just a bunch of team events where we battle it out for the French captaincy for WTC.
It's really interesting, right? Because we've had a few guests on from France before, most notably Olivier Weiss, and he always talks about this French league system you have. The whole country is based around Team 40K and qualifying, having the best team to become the national team for your WTC. But this was a singles event that you went to and won. Is singles as a format evolving and developing in France, or is this like a one-off thing?
No, it's actually developing now. It's actually quite new. Yeah, we have a long history of team events, and now we have a solo circuit, and it's quite new. It's actually like 2 years old, something like that. even 1 year old. So
That's
yeah,
very exciting.
It's brand new, and it's really nice to go and compete within those events. Always nice people, always challenging games. But yeah,
Definitely, yeah. So you mentioned you played fantasy and then Ninth Age and now into 40K. And for those of you who aren't familiar, old fantasy and Ninth Age have like movement trees, and you pivot your units, and it is more reminiscent of an ancient battle than a modern sci-fi warfare. So
exactly.
there's a lot of different skills to apply between those two games. How did you find the transition from one game to another?
Quite easy actually, because it's not that different. The rules are very different, but when you've played that much war game, it kind of comes naturally. You're naturally like you know what you have to do. You're focused on the objective, and so what I found with new people that always sometimes they lose track of what they want to do during the game, and that's what ending up costing them the game. And when you play that much war game, so you don't fall into that pitfall, and usually it kind of works out in the end. So yeah, it was. I didn't think it was difficult to transition from one game to the other.
Somehow jumping from one game to another once you're already good is not that difficult, regardless of how different the rule set is, which I think is very fascinating. And you mentioned you played Sisters when you got into 40K, but obviously you've won this tournament with Grey Knights. Those two armies play super differently in today's day and age. So how did you find adjusting and switching armies throughout the edition for 10th edition and 9th when you got into it?
In 8th actually, but yeah, 8th, 9th, and 10th. I'd say I like armies that fit my playstyle, and I know you're going to touch on that later, but I'm
we can get into it right now. What would you describe your playstyle as?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm not a very aggro player. I'm no Liam, for example. But there's something I've been working on lately, and that's why I wanted to play an army that kind of fall in the category that has a lot of tricks that can go up the board quite fast. And that's why Grey Knights appeals me more than Sisters at the moment, because like very mobile, a lot of shenanigans. Whereas I think the Sisters are very passive in their playstyle, at least the way we play them in France, like mostly.
So when you describe like a defensive, passive playstyle, not aggro, obviously, you're reacting to your opponent. How do you manage that? I have a very similar playstyle as well. I'm just curious. In 10th edition, where the edition is so much about staging up in midfield, charging your opponent turn 2, shooting them turn 2. It's a very fast-paced game. How do you slow it down and play that defensive style effectively?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm trying not to anymore because I feel like I felt it was kind of weakness in my game, not being able to do the aggro thing. So I'm trying to be.
So you're learning aggro. That's
exactly.
Interesting. And how's that journey been going for you? Because going from a defensive play style to an aggressive play style, that cannot be easy for your intuition.
It's not. And I've started I've started playing more aggro's army, like CSM in January, for example, when they were good, like Belgian MSU, lots of small units, not the hackers, the list with lots of small units, and that was very aggro. So yeah, that's something that I think it helps. So you just get a lot of practice with an army that needs to be aggro to do well, and then you start developing the playstyle.
Yeah, definitely. When you talk about an aggro army, I don't think of Grey Knights as an aggro army, or maybe it's how it's used on the table, because they can go up and down and really be on the table wherever they want to be. So you have a lot of control over the tempo. How have you found playing Grey Knights aggressively in this edition?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it doesn't play the same. Doesn't play the same as CSM, for example, where you can just like trade, because for Grey Knights you cannot trade ever, or maybe just at the end of the game. So
you have 7 units.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to. Yeah, you have to find the weak spots and go all in those weak spots for one turn, and then you grab everything. You grab everyone back, and you do that somewhere else next turn. And
so it's kind of like isolating and destroying, like being very aggressive in a certain area of the board.
Exactly.
And just picking a new area every turn.
Yeah, exactly. You just mass as many forces as you can in one place. Just obliterate what stands there, and then you go do that someplace else, next turn. And that's actually the way I play my list, and I think that's I've been having success with it. So must be doing
awesome.
Something
Let's
right.
talk about your list. If you could read your list from top to bottom for us, what would it be?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's not 6 Dreadknight, as you said. So it's 3 Librarians, and one has the +1 charge enhancement. I've got 1 Grandmaster in Nemesis Dreadknight with the Sigil. I've got 2x5 Termies with Flamers and the Apothecary and the Banner. 4 Strike Squads to stick objectives. A Land Raider Redeemer, always good. 3 Dreadknight, regular ones. I think that's pretty much it. And the Tech Marine, I forgot about that guy. Tech Marine to like fix vehicles and make them shoot better. Yeah, so that's basically the list.
So you can't forget the Tech Marine, but I always find it so interesting when you have the 5-man Terminators and the Land Raider Redeemer in here, because those are units that I don't typically see in Grey Knight lists. From my perspective, and I'm not a Grey Knight player, I always see the lists that are like the 20, 30 Terminators, which are the 10-man bricks, and you're just playing this non-interactive game of Warhammer. Mm-hmm. Or you're running like 5-6 Dreadknights. I see Canis Rex often. You're just stat checking people. It seems like you're going for like a little bit of a hybrid approach. Could you justify or like explain why you're taking the units that you're taking?
Yes. Actually, the Redeemer was a test. That was the first time I ran the Redeemer because I've been running kind of the same list, but with a third unit of Termies and Kaldor Drago instead of the Redeemer, the Tech Marine. And I just wanted to try something else.
Was it good?
Found that, it was okay. I missed actually in some games. I missed the Termies. In some other, I was quite glad to have that Redeemer. So yeah, it's always a good vehicle. So it does lots of damage. It's quite hard to shift. Good OC, which is actually the Grey Knights like to play the OC game, and that's why I'm playing the Termies, by the way. Not just because of that, but they are very good at contesting primary, taking primary, because like a lot of OC and you have deep strike within 3.
Right.
If you play Drago, you have +3 in charge, so you can basically flip any objective on the 6 in charge once a game.
So how are you using all these units on the table? Like I understand in concept they all go up at the end of your opponent's turn, and then you can come back down and destroy a section of the table. But your deployment is what, like a Land Raider and 5 strikes and some Dreadknights? Like how are you deploying, moving, and positioning this army as the game gets going?
Yeah. First of all, we mostly play on a WTC board, so usually we have quite a lot of cover on those boards. And I'm usually setting up everything except the one Librarian that goes. There is one Librarian that is not in the squad. I'm usually playing 2 in the 2 squads of Termies because I'm just rolling once and killing myself if I don't. And the one solo Libby is just going by on its own in Deep Strike. Everything else is on the board. I start with 5 Termies into the Land Raider because I like having the option of moving the tank, not advancing, just moving and charging afterwards. And then I deploy the infantry Eden, of course, and the Dreadknights, they try to stand Eden, of course. You don't want to get shot for no reason, especially in Grey Knights, but still in a way that they can move if I get first turn, which you don't want, but half of the time you get. So in a way they can move and get good positions for the next turn, because if you just stay where you are, you just lost a turn. So we don't want that to happen. So I usually like having the Dreadknights on the flanks, where they can go push on the field, still staying hidden, of course. And then maybe next turn, charging something that that they wanted to take the objective near them or something like that, or just teleporting away if there are nothing they can reach.
Yeah, because regular Dreadknights advance and charge and advance and shoot, so they can kind of deploy defensively behind all of those small ruins that WTC offers, pick at extreme angles, and then move advanced charge onto objectives. That's the idea? Yeah,
exactly. That is, they move 14 because they move 8+6, and then they can do whatever they want. So they're kind of fast, actually.
And right, they auto-advance 6 because you're Grey Knights. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's it. And then they fly when they do that. which is funny because people think you lose a lot of movement when you fly over wounds, but you actually don't do that much. Don't lose that much, so you can even like go on the above the small parts of the small wounds, like and not lose that many movements. So
right, so you can cut a few inches and angles that your opponent may not see coming there with the Dreadknights. When I look at this, though, it's not that durable, right? Like, it's all 2-up saves, and it's not, like, soft to kill. But when you have a Land Raider, you have 4 Dreadknights, you have 10 Terminators, and 5 Strikes. Like, it's not a numerous army, right?
No,
so at the end of the day, if a Dreadknight is exposing itself to go punch something on an objective, couldn't your opponent retaliate and just, like, kill that Dreadknight? How are you navigating around your opponent's offense?
Yeah, it depends very much on the army that you're facing. And which pieces you want to preserve, because you have a lot of options in Grey Knights to make sure your units don't die. For example, if I go against an army that shoots a lot and I want to kill something very bad or infiltrate it, or go in some place that will get me shot, you can use the Sigil guy, for example. That's an option that's open early game. Usually people are reluctant to shoot the guy, so it usually stays an option for a while. You have Mist of Deimos, the strats where if guys moves within 9 of you, you can go away. That I use pretty much every turn, because if you position right, usually it's either they have to go towards you, or they don't go into the objective, or they don't go where they want to go, and then they're trying 9-inch charges, which often is not a good trade. So most of the time people elect to go towards you, so you can go do something and then go back in reserve. And there are lots of small tricks that you can do with that. Like, for example, if one of the mistakes people make against Grey Knight is like their units too close to each other. So if you get charged by one unit of Thermis, for example, and then one unit gets wiped, okay, and then you can consolidate onto, I don't know, something that what they just here is not too dangerous.
Yeah, like a Rhino, some other unit.
Yeah, like something like that. Not a Rhino, because it doesn't work with Rhinos. Well, ideally you want something that moves less than 9.
Okay. Yeah, because you want to trigger your Miss of Deimos.
Exactly. So you're just basically telling your opponent, so either you can charge me, so it doesn't work with everything, of course, but can you just kill me in close combat? Usually they cannot. Or just or do you not want to shoot me? Or do you want to trigger Mist?
Right, because Mist basically allows you to take a unit and put it into reserve if your opponent ends a move within 9 of you.
Exactly.
So if you charge a unit, destroy it, consolidate into something else, your unit's not going to get shot because it's locked in close combat. If the enemy wants to fall back to then shoot you, well, they're going to end that move within 9 inches of you, unless it's a Rhino that's ending 12 inches away from you. And then you get to disappear if they end within 9. So that's really nice. It's a good way to basically navigate around damage. Are you like using that every single turn?
I try to, actually, yeah. When you go for playing Grey Knight, especially in the early turns, I always in the back of my mind try to have a plan for how to get back that unit. So as I said, I don't want to trade early. So like deny moves and turn 2 or 3. I always try to find some way to get that unit back, either using Mist or using the Sigil, as I said. But yes, I try to use it as much as I can, and always.
Are you only really playing the game with 1 unit at a time, like exposing 1 unit at a time, and everything else is like relatively hidden, and then you can miss that unit away? Because I imagine if you have like 2 or 3 squads out there, Dreadknights, Terminators, whatever, only 1 gets to miss. So you walk away with 1, your opponent hits the other.
Yes. No, of course I'm playing with the rest of my army, but as we've discussed before, I try to isolate some part of the board and like obliterate what stands there. So those guys, just usually 3 Dreadknights and maybe a squad of Termies, I try to do that as being as hidden as possible, and usually the crackback is not that hard. It doesn't work against every army, of course. And an army that shoots very well and very, very far can be really tricky to deal with, like Tau, for example. Tau is a bad matchup for that list, because you can just you get to miss 1 unit, but then everything else that's on the open can die. But usually against armies that like doesn't shoot as as bad as Tau, or as good as actually as Tau.
Yeah.
Actually, it's usually good enough. You have good enough profiles to take the attrition for a while. So even if you lose one Dreadknight, it's not the end of the world usually. And usually you
When you're
get
playing
to
this
leave.
army, I've played against Grey Knights a handful of times, and I find their damage to be a little lackluster in the anti-vehicle department. Dreadknights help a lot, but
Yes.
killing mass vehicles can still be super challenging, especially doing so while surviving their rebuttal. How do you handle that? Like Terminators just have Storm Bolters and Strength 6.
Yes, but actually Terminators, they have lethality in close combat, so it helps. And then you just have to focus fire, which means you're just picking them apart one piece at a time, and try to find a place where you can do that with like a minimum return fire.
Right.
And Librarians, of course, they help a lot as well, because they can just like dish mortal wounds to those durable models, which is always good.
How do you handle primary if you're making these strategies around like isolate, destroy, leave after you're done so that you can just keep on doing this cycle and not take too many casualties because you don't want to trade, like you said? Your opponent is going to be on, let's say, 3 out of 5 objectives, and you're going to pick on one of them. He's going to hold the other 2, and then you're going to leave. How do you hold any primary in comparison?
So it depends on the mission, of course, and the deployment. But usually you can, of course, you hold your objective, your own objective, and then you can usually hold the second one like close to the deployment zone, being hidden. So
is that what the Land Raider helps as well?
Actually, I like to send the Land Raiders in the middle, because on the WTC tables, it's always kind of tricky to move it. So you want to have the Redeemer cover an objective. So depending on the table and the mission, usually you want to cover the middle, like the Flamers that can overwatch the whole objective, because it's always wholly in the open, this objective on WTC terrain. It's never behind a rune.
Right. Now, WTC terrain is very congested. There's lots of small ruins and cargo containers all over the place, and the gaps between the ruins are not a specific distance to enable you to move through or anything. So having a lot of these larger units like Dreadknights and Land Raider, it can be challenging to move your army, especially move it into a position you actually want. How do you maneuver it with respect to your big profiles and all the ruin walls?
Yeah, the issue is really for the Redeemer, because as we discussed, Dreadknights, they fly, so they can kind of up above the ruins. You lose a bit of movement, but it's not that bad. It's really not. Redeemer is something else entirely, and you just have to, it's like 5 minutes when you get to the table, you look at the board and you see where you can go, and usually there's like one route for him, so you just go where the table
kind of like pre-plan the route, basically.
Yeah,
deploy
exactly.
it here, drive it that way.
Yeah, exactly that. And it usually cannot even cross the mid table. But for that tournament, we played not WTC per se, but something quite close. Like it's a solo layout that we have in France. That's a mix of Games Workshop and WTC. So we have those small ruins that are not 2 inches high, so you can be hidden behind and then go straight through. So that helps the Redeemer a lot. And usually they are not on the middle of the map. They are on the borders. So you can kind of
move around the flanks a little bit, but you're trying to get it in the center, right?
Yeah, most of the time, yes, because that's I feel that's where most of the game revolves usually. And you have this fixed block like OC5 that can go and like try to contest an objective and prompt a response from your opponent, where they have to send something to try to deal with the Land Raiders, something that doesn't die to Overwatch. And you still have Termies in here most of the time.
So you're deploying Terminators in your Land Raider a lot?
Yeah. I like to do that, yes.
Are you like driving it just across the table and then getting the Terminators out and charging with the assault ramp rules that were like really iconic like that?
No, I've only done it once during the tournament, actually. Most of the time it was more like a damage piece, and an objective control piece, like a board control piece. Yeah, in one game, the last one against Sisters, that will cover in part 2 if I got that right. Yeah, I got to go the full 12 inches and then disembowel the termies and charge my opponents to deny him some primary, which was quite the Land Raider move.
Yeah, right. Very, very Land Raider of you.
Exactly.
So let's talk about how you manage your command points. Because I feel like Grey Knights are a super command point intensive army, and they have a lot of CP discipline required to play it. And now that you've added your Land Raider Redeemer, it's like now you want Overwatch, you want to miss a Deimos, you want a 3-inch away, whatever other strats you have. Like, how do you manage your CP, and what is your choices of stratagems that you use and budget for?
Yeah, okay. First, it's actually linked to secondary choice because I always go tactical for that.
Even if you're playing against like a Tau army that's just giving up, bring it down, or something like that.
Yeah. I played against Chaos Knight like the other day, and I just went tactical anyway. Because first and foremost, bring it down is cool, but then you need a second one, and I don't want someone in my army to be doing homers all day.
Yeah, you're actually not good at homers like that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I really like command points. I really want command points, and I'm actually it's been games where I've actually discarded a card that I could have scored, like not a 5-pointer, of course, but like an early investigate that scores you 2. I usually don't score, and I just discard for a CP because I really like, as you said, Grey Knights. They really want CP, and I always budget for Mist of Demos, of course. That's 1 CP. That's easy enough, and then I try to have at least another one, either for a rapid ingress, because you can do that kind of loop.
Where you go miss a Deimos at your opponent's moon phase and then wrap it at the end of your opponent's moon phase. Yeah, that's nice.
And and that's really one of the very strong plays of Grey Knights. People that don't expect it can be taken off guard by that. So I try to have a second one for that. And then depending on the matchup and the thing I want to do in the position in my unit during the opponent's turn, either Overwatch or Armor of Contempt, depending. That and 3-inch deep strike, like once or twice a game. That's pretty much it, because you cannot use anything else because you're too few CPs then.
The rest you don't get to afford.
Exactly. Because there are some nice threats in Grey Knights that I never get to use, like the lone operative one. I always tell my opponent about that, and then I never use it.
Yeah,
CP,
it's one of those things that you wish you could use, but you just mentioned strats that you do use, and there's no room for anything else. And you're already sacrificing tactical cards for command points, right? So you can't get much more value than that. Do you ever fall into the trap though of like, let me try to stay alive here, Armor of Contempt, CP reroll, and go down the defense rabbit hole? I
try not to. I'd be lying if I'd say it never happened.
I did it recently. I understand.
Yeah. Usually, when I know most of the time when I do the command reroll, it's usually a bad call, and I try to convince myself. Sometimes the appeal is too great, but yeah, I try to keep those moments.
It's hard. It's hard to the melt-a-gun goes through against the Dreadknight. You're like, do I really want to just let this happen?
Exactly. It depends on actually depends on the time where, of course, when the wound went through. Like, is it the last thing that could shoot him, or like is that another unit that can shoot the Dreadknight, and will it be dead anyway?
Right.
Do I really want that unit to live? Is it more important than I don't know, having the option of misting ingress later? Yeah, that's a lot of questions that you ask yourself all the time when you play Grey Knights, since it's really not a linear game that you're playing with Grey Knights.
It sounds like this army is very rep intensive, because you have to find a line of play for every unique situation, and then CP management, figure out your primary, figure out your secondaries, and like you're playing tactical, so like the secondaries are constantly changing. You don't know what your game plan is going to be. How many reps do you think you've gotten with this army to become so proficient with it?
I think somewhere around 70, maybe 80, something like that.
Oh my god!
Because I've been playing that quite a lot since the slate dropped. I went second to another Open in France. I got best in faction at Alpine Cup with that.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I've been playing at a lot of tournaments, and then of course I play on TTS and with my my game group in south of France. So yeah, lots of reps. There are some
Is that
matchups
like your
that I know
personal
very,
style where
very
you can
well.
grind out the same army 70, 80 times and not get bored? I feel like I'd get so bored doing that.
I think actually no, because when I do it, I usually grow bored. But what's very fun with Grey Knights is like the way they play. I really like the way they play because you're never short of options. You always have something to do, and you can always go there, do that, and try to create counterplay. And I find that very challenging. And games are always different, not just always same things like staging, going like CSM, where, for example, where you stage a rhino, then you get the chosen out and you punch people and they're dead. And yeah, every game is like a bit different. It's always the same like strategic plan, of course, but in the tactical level, it's always a bit different, and I find that quite refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find tactical makes sense for your army, especially because you want the command points and that's an integral part of your game plan. But scoring tactical cards has got to be difficult for you, right? Like you have 8 units total in your army, and they are very not interested in doing actions and not interested in being sacrificed for engage in all fronts or whatever. How do you actually score secondaries?
Well, first of all, when you get to 2 cards, you want to assess whether you want to get the points or not, especially in the early games. Like an easy tempting target that looks obviously like it's a trap.
It's tempting.
It's tempting, but it's a trap. So you have to pass on that. And then as the game goes on, you become more and more interesting in like throwing units away for points. It's a question of timing, I find.
Right, because if you lose too many resources early, like early secure no man's land, put 2 units out there, get 2 units killed, now you're down a lot of resources for the rest of the game. But turn 4, let's do it.
Yeah, that's right. Turn 4, you've done your damage. If everything has been a bit wear down, there are less units everywhere. So maybe they actually don't kill one of your squad anymore. So you can go and try to do some stuff by the end of the game. And you want to score the points, of course. And action-wise, that's where the Librarians are quite good into the list because they can still do their mortal things while doing actions. So
let's talk about these Librarians. We haven't really touched on them. They're little solo Librarians that just deep strike in. They do a bunch of mortal wounds. You basically roll a die, and then a unit with an 18 takes a lot of mortals, like D3 plus 3. Or
I'm not actually... More. Yeah, it's a 2d3 or 2d6 even if you roll the 6.
Oh wow, it's even more mortals.
Yeah, managed to roll the 12 a couple of times. It's always fun. But yeah, I actually don't play them solo. Not all of them. Only one of them is.
Oh really?
Yeah, because when they are within units, they don't kill themselves, and they get to live. So you get to
keep on using them.
Exactly, you get to do your damage for 5 turns because a solo guy that drops within 18 of something big to kill it usually will die on the next turn because it's just standing in the open. And yes, there is always the play where there's the time when you roll that 1. So if you roll a 1 with the Librarians, that's he takes the wounds. So he takes D6. He has 5 wounds, and I've lost track of the number of Librarians I've killed that way. Like rolling a 1.
I will say,
6.
every time I play against Grey Knights, the Librarian shows up, and somehow I'm okay. You know, it sounds so scary on paper, but like they kill themselves, they do like 4 damage, and then I move on with my life. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. They are not per se the thing that will kill you, but they will. If you manage to keep them alive, and that's why I'm playing them in squads, the damage will pile up at some point, and it's really useful to. Knock out the last couple of wounds that Dreadknights are left. You have shot your Dreadknights, and then a War Dog on 4 wounds. Just the Librarian will kill it on average.
So what kind of targets are you going for with Librarians? And since they're tied to your Terminator units, do you find you're trying to use these Terminator units a little more aggressively to get your Librarians activated? Or is it just like as targets come, you will do damage to them?
Yeah, the Terminators units, they have to control primary as well. So most of the time, one unit will be back, and the other one will trying to do like more disruptive actions, like maybe distracting within 3 in place there where they cannot get charged or shot too easily by something too dangerous, or you can just miss them away if something bad comes your way. And yeah, so I usually don't throw the whole units. Certainly not both units of Charmies. I don't throw them in my opponent's face early. I like to keep them hidden. Maybe just having the Librarian poking around the corner and shooting something. If, like, for example, you're playing against a big target that you really want to kill, but I don't try to do that at all costs. I wait till they become a real issue. Like, for example, a Catan, a Nightbringer, if they stay hidden for the whole game, it's exactly not that bad. If they could try to go my way, then I will try to mobilize around them and kill them.
Doing mortal wounds to like that super tough stuff, I could see that being really, really valuable, right? There's a lot of durable things in the meta, and just nuking it with mortal sounds awesome.
Yeah, the list is really good into Necrons, actually.
That's interesting. So we're going to talk about the matchups in detail in part 2, and I wouldn't have guessed this army is good at Necrons, but we're going to break into that for sure. I was going to ask, though, like, do you find this is obviously designed for the singles tournament, but I know you play a lot of team formats as well. Is this the type of army that like keeps all the games close, kind of regardless of opponent, or do you have like matchups where you blow people out?
You don't have a lot of bad matchups, and you have some very good matchups. Most of the time, matchups are like equal, like small wins for the Grey Knights, and you have some really, really good matchups. I found, like Death Guard, the list obliterate Death Guard.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and you usually most of the time you can always scrap a victory. There's always tools to do that. The roller coaster is not that frequent.
Well, I'm very excited to talk about the matchups now. You know, we're really going to move it into part 2, get to know how you have learned your army over 70, 80 reps, and how you pilot it into armies like Death Guard and Necrons for favorable results. That's crazy to me. I'm very excited to hear how you do that. If we have one more question for you, though, Johan, before I let you go and hit on the part 2. If you had one piece of advice for any aspiring Warhammer players, what would it be?
I think I'd say to stay focused on to have a plan and stick to it, because as I said, most of the time, especially a newer player, when I play against them, I find that they have an idea, and then they go chasing like butterflies because there's something else that happened in a random part of the board, and they caught their attention, and so they forgot the plan. So yeah, I think like having a plan, having an idea how to win, and sticking to it is usually what's the first step to winning.
I think that's a great point. Have a good strategy and stick to it. It's really easy in Warhammer to get distracted by a tactical card, like a tempting target, or
exactly
some weird thing happened on the side of the board. Let's go deep strike over there and deal with it. But that might not be the overall strategy. I love that piece of advice.
Yeah, maybe something you didn't see coming, like a rapid ingress, and then oh my god, I have to go here and there. And maybe just no, maybe it's not that bad, and live with it and
stick to your guns.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Johan, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about your Grey Knights. It's been a very enlightening episode. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited about this one. We haven't had Grey Knights on the podcast in quite some time. And I always love having the French on. You know, you guys have a whole different meta and a whole different take on the game. I find it so fascinating. It's been a pleasure to chat to. Listeners, you can join us for part 2 of this conversation on patreon.com/AOW40K. Your support for this show is entirely how we keep producing it. And then we are on episode 240. So, that goes a long way. It means a lot to us. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you there, patreon.com/AOW40K. Until then, Johan, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. And listeners, we will catch you in part 2. See you there.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. theartofwar40k.com.